When it came to learning, I looked at a chapter titled When a Student Perpetually Struggles. Looking at the title, I did not realize that it was going to get into like vocabulary. I do understand like the importance of vocabulary in mathematics, and I think like reading the 2 chapters this week like opened my eyes up to how truly important it is. Like I do it in my classroom as a teacher to help like with the understanding of algebra, but reading the chapters I read this week really like opened my eyes to like I'm glad I'm actually doing this. So in this one it was a the author did a study on a girl named Kay. Well, I'm assuming it's a girl because her name is Kay. And she just talked about how this student was like struggling even with help and with tutoring and things of that nature. So she had to take like a deeper look into like what was truly going on, and she realized like that she had issues with like receptive language and phonological processing problems. And this led her to realize like they were working with fractions, and she couldn't make connections between like a picture, like if it was 4/5, she didn't realize like she just didn't understand like a fraction meant 4/5, so it's like 4 pieces of 5 total. So she didn't really have that like part to whole understanding, and then she couldn't look at 4/5 as a number, 4/5 as a visual, and like put those two together. Like she couldn't make that connection that 4/5 is the same thing as this picture, and it's the same thing as like if you write out 4/5. So the biggest thing that came from that was as educators we need to realize it early on because you want to catch it as soon as possible. The biggest thing about it is I guess it's overlooked because as teachers like we have to be careful when we label students and talk about disabilities. So it's just like talked about the importance of being able to recognize if a student is having those problems. So like usually a student that's having the problem is just kind of like, oh, they're just struggling, blah blah blah. But like it can like genuinely be a disability. Um, so like it kind of just opened my eyes to like some of my students now. Like I'm like, I wonder are they genuinely struggling or do they have some of like what this text is talking about? Because I'm like kids nowadays they hate fractions, and it's like I don't know if they hate them because of how they were introduced to fractions, or do you not like a fraction because like you can't put together 4/5 from the number and 4/5 from like the actual visual representation. So like and it just talked about like ways you can figure out who these students are. Like their reading and mathematics is usually where they'll have difficulties at, which I feel like that is like even though every student doesn't have this disability, I do feel like that's a lot of what we see today. Like students are struggling in both classes, which was crazy to me because when I think of math, I'm normally like, oh, I think my kids would be good because like yeah, we do reading problems or we do a little vocabulary, but it's not as much as like science and social studies. So it's like one of those things where like they're also quiet because they don't want to speak out and be wrong, which I also feel like that's a lot of students today as well. So like a lot of the things it tells you to look out for, you kind of like, technically that sounds like every child. So that's where you got to actually sit down with the child and make sure like, um, if I give you 4/5, can you tell me like this visual is 4/5? And then it also talked about how they can't tell which finger like was touched when their eyes are closed. So I'm like, that was something that was different to me. So it was like very eye opening. The chapter was so it just made me like realize like the importance of like how ELA and mathematics connect. And in my head, I never really put a connection between the two because like with the receptive language, like that's kind of like a child's ability to understand spoken and written language. So I'm like, I just I just never really put like ELA and math together. I always thought math kind of stood alone. And yeah, true enough, you have a little reading here and there, but it wasn't like you got to read a science passage or you don't have to read to know like the history to something. So that was eye opening. And then the second chapter I read was an exploration of
Hey,
aspects of. Oh,
before you jump to that one, I want to ask you a couple of questions.
okay.
The so do you remember the definition that they use for phonological or the with that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Would you mind? What?
difficulties in perceiving, recognizing, and manipulating the sounds of spoken language to form words and sentences. So, like, it says something like the brain's processing of speech sounds. Because I had to go back and look at it too, because I'm like, what does this even mean? Like, I had to write, like, even receptive language. I was like, I don't even know what this means. Because initially they started with dyscalculia, and how is all this gonna connect together?
Good. So so one of the things I just wanted to try to highlight and bring out of what you were saying before you jump to the article discussion is
Hmm.
the the when you say 3/5, and one of the things that I think that's an easy one for math teachers to connect to this phonological issue is like saying tens and tenths,
Hmm.
hundred and hundredths. Like, we're trying to be really particular with the way that we're saying the THS to represent the place values. And this is a common area that students struggle who have this type of issue. And it's just and it's a common issue for all students, right? And so I really liked your article, and this is a one that I hope that people that are getting into the science of reading and trying to connect that in other disciplines. This is probably one of the best articles that I found that connect the science of reading concepts to mathematics education.
I agree because I did like this chapter because I was like, oh, okay, like normally I'm not big on reading, but I'm like, I guess because I'm reading about math and it's something I'm interested in, like these readings have been like eye opening, but this one definitely too because like in my classroom, I don't let kids say like point 0.5 or point 0.6. I'm like 6/10 because I'm like they don't have like number sense, and I'm like even with fractions, like I don't let them do 2/3 is 2/3, but it's like I teach 8th grade, and by the time they get to me, the disconnect they have in like with the numbers and like the place values simply because like they've been allowed to express them in a way that like 2/5 it doesn't make sense to like 2/5 like technically I guess they're the same but they're not the same, and I'm like I'm seeing why they're probably struggling now. It's just because like there's no connection between like what you're saying and what like you're really trying to interpret, if that makes sense.
That's perfect. I appreciate you clarifying that and offering some ideas. I think another one, just a simple one, is just to emphasize that THS as we're saying words like that in mathematics to represent the differences. So